Many companies in the storied history of gaming have achieved the highest of highs, only to then plumb the depths in ruin, whether through stupidity, avarice, or both. Hi there, my name's Gray, this is Consoletronics, and in this video we will explore the triumphs and largely self-inflicted tragedy of one of the most prolific and high-profile developers to fall from their perch, in my look at the best, worst, and forgotten Konami games. Konami as a games developer have been knocking about a lot longer than most realise, with their first foray into the new and exciting world of video games being released in 1977. And while many hits would follow, it would be 1986 in the release of the game Akumajo Dracula, aka Castlevania, that Konami would position themselves as one of the elite studios of the 80s and beyond. And in many ways, the Castlevania franchise has mirrored Konami's own fortunes, from going from strength to strength in the 80s and 90s to looking rudderless and ultimately becoming irrelevant in the 21st century. I mentioned that Konami were old hands in this gaming lark, so let's have a look at one of their earlier arcade hits with Frogger. Get your toad across the road for points and glory in a simple but strangely addictive game that's legacy is still being felt in mobile games like Crossy Road. Even Sega, at the height of their success in the 90s, released their own version called Ribbit. But Konami have at least kept the franchise hopping along, with many sequels, spin-offs and re-releases since its 1981 debut. Soldiers aren't born, they're made, so grab your joystick and give me 20. It's Combat School, aka Boot Camp, a big hit on the home computer scene here in Europe, but better remembered as a Konami Hypersports follow-up in the arcades everywhere else. Bit of a novelty if truth be told, and many of my friends and myself included thought it a Full Metal Jacket game, minus the psychological damage of course. But it's fun, and at the end of the day, that's what's important.
Your last pin, dump.
We love shoot 'em ups round here, and Konami's contribution to the genre can on no account be overlooked. They're the developers of early pioneering efforts such as Gradius, Salamander, Time Pilot and Twinbee, to name but a few. But Thundercross 2 from 1991, which, like the 1988 original, never received a home port, is a true hidden gem. It may not reinvent the wheel or introduce any crazy new features to the genre, but it doesn't need to. It's just a simple, rock-solid blaster. Great game. Like with shoot 'em ups, Konami tried their hand at many genres, but they weren't a studio to simply dip their toes in. They, at one time at least, looked to create experiences in players that decades later I still struggle to put into words. Now, the original game was a fun if limited turn-based adventure, but the sequel Suikoden 2 was and still is a true masterpiece. Series creator Yoshitaka Murayama weaved magic through the story of your gathering of the 108 Stars of Destiny in, for me, the best role-playing game behind Final Fantasy VII on the PS1. A classic. Who remembers these then? The Cabbage Patch Kids, a line of odd-looking dolls that became a sensation in the early 80s. But in truth, I only took any interest in them because of my obsession with the Garbage Pail Kids, a piss-take collectible card series that got sued and forced to redesign after the Cabbage Patch Kids got their big brothers, the legal Patch Boys, to intervene. But this 1984 Pitfall-inspired platformer released for the ColecoVision and MSX is a graphically impressive for the time bare-bones caper that shows that Konami early on had a talent for licensed software that over time would become a trademark of theirs. Hi-ho, Silver! Yes, Kimosabi's, the clean-cut, masked face of Wild West Americana, the Lone Ranger, would leap and bound off the pages of the many novels and comic strips and even TV shows to grace us on the new pop culture medium of video games, courtesy of Konami. And shockingly, it ain't half bad. I included it thinking it would be another wasted license in the NES's library like Knight Rider or Airwolf, but bloody hell, Konami produced the high-class Old West run-and-gun RPG hybrid. Top stuff! Trigun, aka Lightning Force from 1990, is one of the more obscure shoot-em-ups out there. Like Thundercross, it completed its tour of duty in the arcades and was very quickly shelved, until a Switch and PS4 port sprung up out of nowhere in 2020. Again, nothing extra special in terms of style, and the slower pace makes it more challenging than it needs to be, but if you're looking for a no-frills old-school challenge, Lightning Force more than delivers. The Goemon or Mystical Ninja series has been a favourite of mine for a very long time now, ever since I came across it on the SNES in the early 1990s. And while I sought out all the PS1 and Nintendo 64 entries, even when they were Japanese exclusive, I never really took the dive into the older arcade or NES adventures. And if I'm honest, it really wasn't worth the bother. This 1986 arcade release is a fiddly platformer that swarms you of enemies, preventing you from noticing any of the humour or charm that's on display. A humble beginning to a great franchise. The early 80s was an amazing time, as no one in the gaming business really knew what they were doing and were willing to try anything. This resulted in the release of many classics and catastrophes in equal measure. Mickey, a 1984 arcade hit and one in which many of my Spectrum-owning mates tell me had a rather tasty home port, but my first impressions of the arcade have been pretty meh. I like the fact that you can attack teachers Glaswegian style, but I'm curious to know if any of you, my loyal viewers, if you liked it. It definitely seems to be a game that could hold interest if given a fair crack.
Don't lie to yourself. It gave you pleasure.
I may have bounced off Goemon and Mickey, but neither were what I would call bad. Nightmare Creatures 2, on the other hand, I've called far worse names. And yes, I know it's not strictly a Konami game, as they simply distributed it, but I bought it because of the Konami logo being prominently displayed on the box, so I've a right to vent me spleen on it. It's a monotonous trudge through old London town, hacking and slashing as you go, and while there are far worse games like it on the PS1, the blood-soaked spectacle of pulling off finishing moves loses its appeal very quickly, and its gore is the only thing it's got going for it. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the video game tie-in to the 1986 box office flop King Kong Lives, known as King Kong 2 in some regions, which is not a sequel to the 1933 stop-motion classic, but a follow-up to the now all but forgotten 1976 reboot, the convoluted history of which is worth its own video. But Konami just couldn't help themselves and grabbed the license with both hands. And while one of their weaker efforts, it's a fun, if nonsensical, liberty-taken adaptation that I'm surprised more Western gamers haven't given a try. I loved it. Do I need to say anything for this one? Do I? Really? What more can I add to the legacy of this game? This was my generation's version of Kennedy being shot. Everyone remembers where they were when they first played this one, and that feeling that this was truly a moment of history. And while the series had been kicking about on various 8-bit systems for a while, largely out of sight, ironically, but like Final Fantasy VII before it, on the 32-bit systems, it just felt new and exciting. And the industry, for better or worse, would never be the same again. We've looked at a lot of games thus far, but we've yet to check out any from one of the most dominant genres in the arcades and on home systems throughout much of the 80s and 90s, the scrolling beat-em-up, a genre that Konami would contribute to more than most. This is the coin-op exclusive Violent Storm from 1993. Mutants have kidnapped your bird, and, well, that's it in terms of story, but this is a top-shelf beat-em-up that oozes quality on every level. Check it out if you haven't already. It is awesome. A few eyebrows were raised at the timing of this game's release to arcades in 1990, but other than that, we had no complaints whatsoever. Control Ellen Ripley in your bullet-strewn quest to destroy the alien hordes on LV-426 once and for all. You know, it always puzzled me why Konami didn't get the license for Alien 3, but what we did get was one of, if not the very best run-and-gun shoot-em-up of its day. Konami at this time were the industry leader when it came to both quality and innovation, topping both themselves and their rivals with standout games. But as you all know, all good things come to an end. Released a few months before Final Fight in 1989, but graphically and gameplay wise it feels like something from the dark ages. And while truly awful Konami games from this era are like hen's teeth, I've included this arcade exclusive beat 'em up to show that even the best developers can cock it up. It's not often you'll hear me say this in this video, but this is one game not just beat 'em up fans should give a wide berth. Like Nightmare Creatures 2, Hybrid Heaven here, an early Nintendo 64 release, has a well-established and loyal fanbase. Although if you ask me, they should all have their bedrooms redecorated with rubber wallpaper. Similar to the early days of the arcade scene, the mid-1990s was awash with titles trying to get to grips with the new 3D technology. Hybrid Heaven was certainly a better example, but very much remains a product of its time. I think I've kept you waiting long enough. If I didn't touch upon one of the very cornerstones of the much loved run and gun genre, I think I would be lynched by many of you. So we'll look at the black sheep of the Contra franchise, when Konami, in a very public two fingers up at Nintendo, brought both Castlevania and Contra, two jewels in the Nintendo crown, to the enemy, the Sega 16-bit. This was a massive shift for the industry at the time, but Contra Hard Corps has largely been forgotten even by Sega fans. But while it can't claim to be the best 16-bit Contra, it's up there. And since we'll never get a new Contra worth playing, it's well worth revisiting. Hard to believe now, but this was an important early release for Konami, and the penguin character would regularly pop up in subsequent games, notably parodious. But it is what it is, a simplistic force-scrolling dodge the hazards game, and this 1985 Famicom version of the original MSX release from 2 years prior is fun for a bit, but that's all. This is Astro Invader, aka Kamikaze, from 1979, a Space Invaders clone with a swagger about it, and actually a bit of fun, even if it does look and feel like the primordial ooze that gaming would emerge from. But I wanted to show off a title from the early days, and this caught my eye. I friggin' love this game. We've looked at a couple of lesser known titles already, but Crisis Force, a late 1991 Japanese Famicom exclusive release, is one of the best shoot 'em ups you've probably never played. It simply exudes class and confidence from the first level to the last. Astro Invader may have been the first tentative steps for Konami, but this was them at the height of their powers. An absolutely stunning game. No, not that Black Panther, nor is it to be confused with Capcom's Black Tiger, released the same year. This one intrigued me, but it doesn't do much with the gimmick of controlling a cybernetically enhanced big cat. Could've and probably should've been something special, but instead never rises above generic. As a big Resi fan and all-round horror movie nutter, I was eagerly anticipating the release of this one. And what we got made all the survival horror games we'd played and loved before it look like cute little children's stories. Having revolutionized gaming in 1998 with Metal Gear Solid, Konami would do so again the very next year, thanks to Keiichi Toyama and Team Silent, allegedly comprising all the so-called troublemakers that Konami didn't know what to do with. And while many of the criticisms of this game's janky graphics and lack of polish are justified, it was and still is a high watermark moment of the 32-bit era and beyond. And we go from one of Konami's most high-profile releases to one banished to obscurity from being a Famicom Disk System exclusive. And though it would get a cartridge re-release much later, Biomiracle Bukati Koopa is well worth a bash, as I've really enjoyed its simple, cutesy charm. Prices for a complete copy are in the eye-watering range, but that's why God invented emulators. The follow-up to Snatcher and for a long time Japanese exclusive graphic adventure was a few years ago finally fan-translated, allowing us all to enjoy the game that gives you the option of copping a feel on each and every female character on screen. And out of all of the games on Hideo Kojima's robust resume, this is the least talked about. So put that right and give it a feel. Try. I love me some rhythm games, some Parapata Buster Groove to Donkey Konga or Hatsune Miku, and one of the big game changers, of course, came from Konami. It's Beat Mania. Similar to DJ Hero, it's an addictive button basher. This is the PS1 release, but there would be no end to the sequels and updates until it would be overshadowed by Konami's stablemate Dance Dance Revolution in the early 2000s. If Konami had one weakness in their gaming portfolio, it would be the lack of one-on-one fighting games, but it wasn't for the lack of trying. This is Monster Maulers, where you fight a menagerie of mythical beasties, and the big gimmick being two players can team up to take them down. But as I don't have any friends, you're just going to have to watch me play by my lonesome. Definitely no threat to the beat-em-up royalty of Street Fighter or Tekken, but an interesting installment to the genre. And for the final game, I had to pick something special, something iconic, that even now has the power to get any gamer's heart racing and pockets emptying. It's Turtles, the arcade game, one of the biggest pop culture phenomenons of its day, given the gaming treatment it deserves by a studio who are second to none to a generation raised in the hazy lights of the arcades. And while the story of Konami may not have a happy ending, at least this video will. And I'm well aware that I left out many great games, but if this video does well enough, I may follow it up with a part 2, so spread the word. And if you'd like a deeper look at Konami franchises like Castlevania and Contra, I'll include links to videos on screen, so check them out. So, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did in making it, and until the next time, sayonara.